Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Building Classifiers with Collect Earth Online and Earth Engine.
I'm David Saw. I'm a professor at the University of San Francisco and a principal in an environmental think tank called Spatial Informatics Group.
I'm Gino Michelli. I'm a developer relations engineer on the Earth Engine team. So welcome. So we have a lot on the agenda today. We have a full hour. Thank you for sticking with us to the very end, hopefully not the bitter end. We are going to be introducing you to the concept of geospatial AI, and then we will be discussing briefly the introduction to Collect Earth Online, what it is, how it solves a problem. David will be sharing with us some demos of Collect Earth Online. Then I will be introducing you to how you can analyze your data in Earth Engine and train classifiers. And finally, we'll be opening up the floor to you to talk a little bit about where we are now and where we need to go in terms of our platform thinking. Right, so start with geospatial AI. I don't know if you heard this, but AI has been kind of a big deal lately, particular machine learning. You see in this multilinear graph here that there has been a huge spike in the number of publications around, in particular, machine learning from 2016 to 2018 onto today. There has been a special intersection of machine learning in the greater scope of artificial intelligence, traditional computing, and geospatial big data, which has been called GeoAI. So that's applying AI, in particular machine learning, to the problems of big data and geospatial big data. Right? So there are different types of tasks that we typically talk about that can be accomplished with machine learning and AI. One is change detection, which is the mapping of changes in the landscape over time. Another is image classification, in which we have an image, we have a set of labeled training data, and we want to actually classify the pixels in that image, either with or without actually human training. The third type of GeoAI model that we typically talk about is object detection. So object detection is telling me, tell me where all the palm trees are in this scene, given only a smaller labeled set of images, which then the model learns from and can adapt to perform these labeling tasks. Right? Now, each of these models have different requirements, but they all have something in common. One is that for the most part, they need large amounts of data in order to train actually usable models. So they're data hungry, the volume we talk about. They also need a wide variety of data, especially with intra-class variance, because if we give examples that are too specific, the model can't learn how to generalize to things it's never seen before. And lastly, obviously we want these labels to be as close to reality as possible, so we talk about veracity. Now, each of these models that we talk about have different input data requirements. Okay. So because of this, the data structures that we use to represent these different, what we call reference data, vary greatly, creating special challenges. Enter foundation models. Foundation model is essentially an ML model that's trained on a very large amount of data, but it's not specifically trained for a specific task. So it's not like I'm going to do this particular land use classification with this model. But rather, you can then take the foundation model and fine-tune it for a variety of different applications. This principle of foundation models essentially can democratize the use of GeoAI, and a similar evolution must co-evolve for data that will feed into these models, because it's currently a big problem, a big gap. And for this talk, we're talking about the production and access of this data. In particular, we want to invite you to think about the current state of affairs where we're kind of thinking in terms of projects. We start a project, collect data, train a model, publish some results, move on to the next project. Instead, think about creating platforms where the data that are collected for training the model are openly available, can be peer-reviewed, quality controlled, that can incorporate remote sensing and field data, that are then integrated with foundation models which are publicly available, and which can be continually improved by the next iteration of research. We're not starting from scratch each time. So to enable this process, we're going to have, David is going to talk to us a bit about Collect Earth Online. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Gina. So when you guys hear or see that big vision that Gino just laid out there, it sounds like it's completely and totally overwhelming, right? There's a whole bunch of data that you need to collect from a whole bunch of different institutions in a whole bunch of different formats. It needs to be open, it needs to be accessible, it needs to be shareable. That's a daunting task. Well, Collect Earth Online isn't, oh, there we go. Here's the challenge. Collect Earth Online, the idea behind it is to recognize what that challenge actually is. You know, collecting field data, to Gino's point, it is time consuming and it is expensive. Interpreting remote sensing imagery is also complicated, expensive. You need high resolution imagery, you need time series, you need specialized software. You need the ability to record this in a variety of different places. How many of you guys have ever experienced that challenge? Yeah, everybody, right? You see this, you feel this, we know this. You know, solution to this is like, how do you overcome it? You know, let's build an open source platform that allows you to visualize a variety of different images. Let's create a situation where you could actually organize this information in a variety of different structures to go after the things that we care about, whether it's deforestation, crop loss mapping, land cover mapping, a variety of different sorts of things. And that's what the impetus of why CEO was actually built. It was built out of that need, and it was built out of that need from a variety of different organizations. FAO, where's the FAO folks? There you guys are. Raise your hand, check in your emails. Thank you, FAO. So if you look at how this whole application was built, it was actually built as a need from multiple organizations based off of a bunch of different use cases. So this thing was genuinely community built and derived, right? And that's what makes it exciting. If you look at the number of users that Collect Earth Online has, it has 3,700 institutions, over 11,000 individual users, close to 20,000 individual projects, and that next number is staggering and growing. It's got 23 million samples in there and growing at a rapid pace. So imagine if we were to be able to take information at that scale and put it into Gino's vision. That would be amazing. That would allow us to take that next step. Benefits of it being online, or the benefits of the process itself, it's that it's free and accessible. Democratizing the ability to contribute to that next generation of GeoAI is critical, right? It's critical for a variety of different reasons. Making it online and cloud-based eliminates a lot of technology barriers that you typically see in some of these organizations. Allowing multiple users from multiple different organizations or multiple different points of conversation to enter and contribute to that data is also critical and important. Has access to a whole bunch of different imagery, whether it's the NICFI planet imagery or maybe your own drone shots. And it integrates with a variety of other tools, whether it's the CPL tools, CPL Suite, which is an amazing set of suites, GEE products that we've been listening to all week. And it also promotes data consistency and quality control functions, right? All these things that we as a community request and desire and need, we're able to aggregate into one spot and actually use. It's pretty powerful. Flexible data collection. Do you guys remember that slide that Gino stuck up there? It's like, hey, I got to draw polygons. I got to put in points. I got to have a plot design that's circle. I need one that's rectangular. Being able to have that flexibility and consistency in the way that you actually collect information, well, it's the first step in the interoperability between the different data sets that need to be collected to be able to build things like foundation models that have global accessibility. So that flexibility is very, very, very important. Also, the types of information that you're collecting, when you're actually going up and you're building survey questions and collecting information, having a lot of flexibility and consistency in the way that you're able to design that and communicate that is also very important. And then the publish and share part, right? How do you publish and share your information? It takes a lot of time to collect information. How many of you guys have spent a lot of time collecting reference data? How many of you guys love it? I don't see a single hand. I see one hand. I see one crazy person, and we love you. Keep doing it. But for the vast majority of us, it's a huge labor of love, right? And so making sure people have recognition for it and it's appreciated not only in the data set itself, but the models and downstream product that is connected with is critical and important. So being able to integrate that into that system is necessary. And then connected to that, being able to give the ability to build rich metadata functionality. All those different things that you need to do to report about a data set that you're going to ingest in a model is critical. So having that flexibility with the metadata is also important. So all these different components people are thinking through, and we integrate it into Collect Earth Online. Now, let's go through a demo. And I saw the demo gods weren't very kind to the presentation before us, so we're going to do a different type of presentation. I'm going to click through it, right? It's late in the day. They're tired.
It's still a demo.
It's still a demo. It's a demo. It's a click-through demo. Thank you. So what we're going to do, we're in Northern California, for those of you in Zoom land. What we want to be able to do is we want to be able to classify forest and non-forested areas over time. So that is the project that we're going to go through. And our idea is that we need to collect input data. We want to create a reference data set that has either forest or non-forest identified. And from that, we're going to run a random forest classification on that data set. That's the process, right? How do we do it? Step 1, build an institution, right? If you belong to an institution, it's great. If you're not part of an institution and you want to set up an institution, let's say you have a local NGO and you want to participate, we can set up an institution for you. How much does it cost? Nothing. It's free. Contact us, we'll get this whole process set up. Once you have an institution, the neat thing about an institution is you can start setting things up. Each institution can set up its own catalog of imagery. And there's a whole bunch that are in there already. There's a variety of stuff like Mapbox, OpenStreetMap. If you're in the Global South, the tropical areas, and there's NICFI available, and for some organizations we're able to make those data sets available. But there's a lot of flexibility in here as well. There's the ability, if you have your own WMS feed for information that you're collecting on your own, you could pipe that in. If you go and you take your own drone shots and you want to be able to pipe that information in, you could do that as well. If you are a whiz-bang at Earth Engine and you create your own image collection and you want to be able to pipe that in, there's the ability to do that as well. So there's a list of specific images, right, or photos that you can pipe in here. If there's more, if you don't see something on that list, let us know. We'll figure out how to integrate it. Next step. Oh, one other thing. Don't go back. One other thing. When you actually push in imagery, you could also identify whether or not you want that imagery to be publicly available to everybody or private to your institution. So all those security questions that we hear people asking for are integrated into this process. Now that you have an institution, you have users attached to your institution, you have imagery attached to your institution, you want to create a project. So you go to the Create Project page, and you get a nice little window that looks like this, and you have a couple choices. Let's say you're doing the same sort of analysis over and over and over again, and you have a template for it. Like, I don't know, a global forest resource assessment or something like that. You can just go to that template, download that template, and then the entire project will be set up for you, and you can modify it. That's a shortcut, right? So there's templates for that. If you didn't want to do that and you want to set up your own new project, I can go to where that little orange box is, and I could type in my little example. And for this one, we're going to use Geo for Good Demo. I'm going to type that in. And I also want to look at the very bottom over there, and who could actually see this? Can I make this available just to group administrators? Can I make it available to the general public so we could just do a big, huge mapathon? You have your choice. You could actually pick. And you could also choose whether or not you want to have different custom variables put in there. Like, so for example, in this example, we want to be able to put in plot confidence scores on the collection page so people can see how well they're actually doing, all right? So I go through that and I click all that. And then I go through, the next step is like, okay, what imagery do I want to use? So in this example, let's just use the Mapbox satellite image. We'll use that as the base map that we want to actually look at. And what you'll see down below is that there's some private institutional data sets that we also have that we could pull in. There's some NAPE imagery that's false color. I have some NAPE imagery that's true color that's connected to our institution. And I want to be able to pull those in and use those potentially for our analysis. Step after that is I want to go through my plot design. What do I want my plots to look like? Think about this, the flexibility component, right? I could either just say, okay, put in random plots of a certain size, make those plots circular of a certain dimension. Make them gridded. Let me put in some CSV points that have a center for it, and I want to make a buffer around it of some sort. Let me import a shapefile, right? A lot of flexibility depending on your sample design. You could actually line that up. In our situation, we're going to probably put in a 30-meter square. That's what we want to do. The next thing that you could look for is one of the questions that came up during the ground conversations is, can you actually assign specific users to do a certain proportion of the plots themselves? This is where you'd be able to do it. You could add different users from your institutions. We added Kyle and Annie in this example to the team. Said, hey, you guys are going to be collecting data here with Peter, because he likes doing that ad nauseum. And you guys are going to do an equal amount. So I think what we have over there is equal assignments. They're going to, we're fair. We're going to make them each do 50 points or 100 points, right? And then we also want somebody to check on them, right? This is the quality check. I want to be able to activate that stuff. I want a subject matter expert to verify the samples that they're collecting. And God help us, I'm the subject matter expert in this example. Whoa. I'm also don't want to sample too many of them, so I'm going to limit the amount of stuff I'm going to check to 20%. So I say, okay, I'm going to check 20% of their samples, and we're going to go. So once we ask,
Just keep them honest.
Just keeping them honest. I'm watching you, Kyle. All right. Now we have the plot designed. Now, what do you want to look inside of that plot? There's a bunch of different things you could do there as well. I could say, okay, let me put in a whole bunch of different samples inside of that plot. Let me just look at 30 different points inside of that plot and give me an assessment of it. Make it gridded. Let's look at that. Let's just look at the plot as a whole and assess the plot as a whole with an interpreter. So I want just one sample point right in the middle. Or you can say, don't put any samples in there. Let the user actually create their own polygons inside of that plot, because I want to use this for a specific machine learning algorithm that needs a specific patch configuration. You have that flexibility. For our example, we're going to say, hey, no, let's just put a plot in the center. Let's build some cards around that, and let's move from there. Okay, so once we do that, hit next. Then I start building my questions, right? What kind of survey questions do I want to build? What are we studying again? Forest cover. Yes forest, no forest over time. So I'm going to build 3 different survey cards, one for 2000, one for 2015, and one for 2021. And I'm basically going to say, hey, is this forest? Is this non-forest? So you can start setting up rules based off of your survey questions that are intelligent to each other, right? So if I say, yes, this is a forest, you could have, if you say yes to that, you could have a subsequent set of questions that tee off from it. In this case, if it's forest, is it, I'm going to give us categories. Is it 25% cover, 50% cover, 75% cover, 100% cover? I get to decide that as the designer of the survey. And there's a whole bunch of different rules and ways to do this. We don't have time to talk through it now. There's a bunch of stuff online. We could train you guys on how to do it. But you set up the survey questions, and it's ready to go. And they're all nested. Next thing we need to do is that you have these interpreters. You're not going to get a brand new interpreter and just throw them into the fire. Idea is to create an interpretation key that's agreeable or defensible to whatever the product is that you're trying to build out. So in this example, we have 2 different definitions of what forest covers are. We have the Forest Service definition. We have a FAO definition. We're going to come up with what we think is appropriate, and we're going to create different chips that people could refer back to when they're asking themselves, hey, this is really on that edge. What should I actually call it? Right? So this becomes one of these reference that an interpreter could use when they're actually running through their samples. And this needs to be thought through when you're doing the sample design in the beginning. That was a lot of work to set this up, right? Yeah, who's tired? I'm tired. All right, next step is we publish the thing. So we publish it, it's up, people could use it. Kyle and Annie get an email saying, start your sampling. Peter's watching them in the lab. What does he do? What does she do? Go to first plot. They click on the first plot, and they start interpreting, right? The best part about the interpretation is all those things that we configured allows the interpreter to look at the different dimensions of the imagery that's available for that specific project. You can look at different time periods, right? So if you go to the first card, I'm trying to find if this is forest, yes or no, in 2020, 2021. So I want to make sure my time period for the imagery matches that. I'm going to look at my nape imagery, maybe true color, maybe false cover to give myself information, right? I'm not sure about either of those things. I might want to download a KML file so I can go into Earth Pro so I can look at a time series, or port into maybe some other information products that I have to look at some secondary information systems to check on this stuff. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of giving tools available to your interpreters to interpret that specific plot in the way that matches up your interpretation classification guidelines, right? Second thing that's also interesting is that it couples right with a lot of the functionality in Earth Engine. So not only do you have the interpretation page, but you have a GeoDash page that gives you a lot of these time series functions. So if you look on the right-hand side, you see this time series of a graph. Those are, in this case, it's a NDFI measure for every Landsat imagery for that specific scene. And you can click on any one of those points, and it will pull up that imagery. So you can go to where you have that 2021 point and scale in and look, and you could actually look at different images for those different time periods to help you do your interpretation. You did all of that. You're really good. You kind of click through all this stuff. You say, okay, this is forest. I know that because I checked out all the data. I know the interpretation guide. I'm trained. I'm scared of David. And then you say, what percent cover? It's 25%. I did it. Click, boom. How confident am I on this point? Ooh, I'm good, 100%. Right? If you're not confident, you can go 50%. Or you can say, I have no idea. I'm guessing, 0%. And that sort of stuff, depending on how you define your quality controls, allows the second interpreter to go back and look at your data set, right? There's a lot of flexibility. All this stuff isn't hardwired. The project developer gets to identify how they want to configure all this stuff. Now, we go through and we do this for a whole bunch of different points, and we have a whole bunch of different data. We could actually pull that data out of the system relatively easily with a bunch of interesting metadata. We have the plot itself, the sample itself. We have the person who did it. We have how long it took them to do it, right? Do you think that stat would be useful? Oh yeah, that stat would be very useful. You might want to take the person who's really fast, Annie's much faster than Kyle, and next time, instead of making it even, we might want to tilt a little bit more to her, right? And then you also get the classification and all the other attributes that we had in the sample. And from this point, I hand it over.
Enter Earth Engine. All right. Now you have your data. You've exported it to CSV in this case, right?
Yes.
You have all your labeled plots. And you just export it, import it, and you're done. No, it's almost that easy. You can export your CSV from Collect Earth Online, and then through the Earth Engine code editor, you import directly. It's in a format that's friendly for Earth Engine, so you don't have to massage it or do anything with it first. You import it, then you have a table asset in Earth Engine, which you can then use to visualize and see all the points and the data that were collected. Or you can use that to train a classifier now directly in Earth Engine. So handing it off to Gino for part 3, okay. Building a classifier in Earth Engine. Okay. Earth Engine has several machine learning capabilities built in. In particular, there is a pretty decent set of classifiers built in. You just have to pass in the training data, train your model, and then you can make predictions about areas that you haven't seen before. So here's an example using Earth Engine JavaScript, which is a kind of simplified version of JavaScript, where we're loading in the samples that were exported from Collect Earth Online, and we're adding a column to them with a random number. Why are we doing that? Because we want to split this data set into 2. So we're taking 70% of it, and we are randomly assigning that to be the training data. And then the other 30% we're holding out so that we could use that to test our predictions, to test how well the model is performing, okay? Then we train a classifier using the SMILE implementation of random forest. And there's a parameter you can control the number of trees that get generated. We train on that training set that we just selected, that 70% of samples. And we say, look in the CEO data at the column called actual. That's going to be the actual label that Annie and Kyle created, right? And then finally, we use that to classify the rest of the map that we don't have labels for. And we want to put the result in a column called predicted. Now that column predicted should have a label, probably a number, forest, non-forest, right? And here's the result. So you could see the entire area being classified. The sort of kind of puke green area is the forest area. And the transparent, it's
Really?
cyan, sorry.
Cyan, yeah, there you go.
And I forgot the word.
Yeah, there we go.
I was scared to pronounce that one. And the transparent pixels are non-forest. There, looks like it worked pretty well,
Yeah.
right? And I think David now is going to talk to you a little bit about platform thinking.
Yeah, so this is where we're intentionally leaving a large room for a conversation. Honestly, because like trying to figure out how to do a lot of this stuff, there's a lot of presentations and a lot of graphs of people talking about building large-scale foundational modeling. But like if we want to do something like this as a community and have it scale in a way that has global impacts where we actually have all the different voices, how do we do that, right? And like right now, the way it's working, it's like Gino was saying right in the very beginning, it's very project-based, institution project. You build something, you have a data set, you have a model, you try to share it. It's difficult to share the model. It's difficult to share the data unless you have personal relationships. It's hard to scale this thing out, right? And so what we're hoping to do and what we're hoping to get going with the conversation is what are the things that are needed in order for these large-scale systems to be able to operate in a way that's meaningful to all of us, right? You know, some of the stuff that we really care about is making sure that stuff stays open and freely available. That is critical, right? Because if you don't give accessibility for folks to have a voice, then a lot of things shut down. Second thing that we're really interested in is how do you actually measure quality control? How do you put in quality control and all the different dimensions of quality control, right? Because we're all biased in terms of what we think high quality is or what we think meaningful information is. How do we integrate that into these platforms? Peer review, right? And peer review with formal methods and peer review and informal methods are important. Not only do you need the journal publication for your professional pathway, but it's also important to talk to those communities who are your peers to ensure that you have their measures in this as well, and it meets their expectations. Incorporating remote sensing and field-based information. Right now, this is ad hoc. People are doing this on specific projects, getting fully integrated systems where information tees off with each other is a place where we all say we want to go. And you see use case after use case where this is important. And then that integration with a foundation model, we hear that term all the time. We think we know what it is. We see shadows of what we think it is through things like ChatGPT, and Bart's like, wow, that's kind of cool. Maybe I could train that so I could write my paper. Kidding. But can I create a foundation model that for Earth observations where I could train it for a specific sort of application, whether it's commodity mapping or tracking a wildfire, and I could accelerate the development of that tool? That would be powerful. And how do I do that? And then how do you continuously improve uncertainty over time in this sort of framework? So these are the sorts of things I'm hoping we can kick off a conversation, or what we're hoping we can kick off a conversation with. So with that, the big question that we have is, how far off are we in this sort of thinking? Does anybody here have a shared experience in any of this stuff? And if we had to identify next steps or major challenges or major opportunities, what would those be? Right? And I'm going to talk to Peter because we had a great question beforehand. Peter, maybe you can go to the mic and kind of kick off some of the stuff that we talked about.
I know there are going to be a lot of questions, so if you could just line up single file behind the microphones, that would be excellent.
Come join me, please.
Yeah, otherwise we're going to pick on people, and I have the next one over there, and the next one over there, and there's one over here.
Yeah, so I remember seeing this about 5 years ago, at one of the last Google Earth Engine user summits, and what's been really interesting to see is I love the uncertainty piece coming in, because that was a big piece that was missing. And where I'm kind of, challenged is actually this organization and transferring that information into people who are making those models. These seem to sort of be happening in two different places. And so how can we actually use something like this when there are these project motivations to actually work together on a common way?
Would you mind if I just grabbed one of the specific examples I know you have in your brain?
Yes, please do.
So we were chatting, and you said you had close to 1 million samples collected.
In Collect Earth Online.
In Collect Earth Online. Thank you. That's amazing. One of the challenges you said, well, hey, how do I actually take all those different data sets from the different projects and pull them together?
That's right, yeah, because I was using the template piece to keep all of my projects consistent, which I really appreciate. It helps setting up the project really well. But now I have 50 projects that all have data that I don't want to have to write a script myself personally to actually manage all of that. And then also, I would love to have an easier way to kind of port it over and to do that machine learning piece, right? Like instead of me having to import it and bring all that over once I had the million points, that is still a bit of a cumbersome piece going from one platform to another platform to hopefully results and then back. And I'm at that point where I'm in big data. And managing that big data is a challenge individually, which is why I'm really happy to have large platforms that might manage some of this data into the future when my project funding goes away. Right? I mean, and so I kind of want to leave it at that, is how do we actually build this for the next 50 years, not just the next 5 years? Because I come from a world of the Landsat time series, and one of the foundational problems is data that was collected and used early on is not in the system. So to me, this is kind of that bigger piece of helping us all move forward and work together rather than kind of individually and thinking long-term, not just funding cycles.
Yeah, well, I think that there are at least 3 components to this, which I myself can't build this week, but one is the standards for communicating and defining the different metadata, the way that systems talk to each other, right? Just having an agreed upon standard. The other is practices, so having it become a habit or accepted or actually encouraged that you will share that data. But it's still difficult, even if there are practices and standards, so you need to have tooling which also makes it easy for you and makes it a no-brainer, almost harder not to do that. Right? And related to those 2 are incentives, right? Are you incentivized to do that either socially or financially or some other way? Is it in your best interest to do that, right? All of those are part of the equation, and that's why this hasn't been solved, right? Because it's not just a technical problem, it's a people problem and an economic problem. So we can do our part by lowering the bar, right? This is what like Open Forests tried to do, Collect Earth Online has tried to do, Ground we're trying to do, lower the technical bar so that it's easier to follow good practices. And hopefully in the process, some good practices will come out of that and become even the de facto way of doing things, which you can then formalize as standards and understand what we need to build. Because a lot of times we don't even know what we need to build until, what standards we need to create, let's say, until we've actually created a tool and have collected 23 million points and have gone through that experience. So,
Go ahead, Remy.
that answers your question.
No, go ahead and answer the question. I'm lining up.
No, I mean, just to build on that too, right? So it's promoting people's incentive structures, just like Gino was saying. If there's a way for a person to get a publication, compensation, recognition, and we're able to archive that in a way that could be used in some sort of anvil for future generations, those are the standards, and that's a fundamental step in a lot of this stuff.
I was wondering on the slide you showed for the interpretation keys, if this is not also a part of the puzzle that we should automize and standardize somehow. It could be relatively straightforward to have an option within Collect Earth Online to select a couple of points to be inserted in the interpretation key so that we could have that standardized. I think one of the really fundamental issues we have with those data sets is the way it's labeled, and the way the interpretation keys are built is pivotal. So I think somehow we should put that in the list of things we want as future features. We should have that set up somewhere.
Yeah, that was from, that's another one of the great things about Geo for Good, right? These conversations when you're talking through this stuff and you're taking a step back, that's a huge key need. And if there was like an initialization process in the beginning of these projects where you got to go through X amount of interpretations to build that interpretation key. And you say, okay, we all agree with this. This is what we want to do. And then that gets put into the system. I think something like that would help a lot of people.
Precisely, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was not checking my email. I was looking for your number to send you a picture of yourself.
Sorry. Do I still get the photo? No?
Nice save.
Go ahead. Thank you.
So let me just start with the basic question. I'm interested, haven't used it before. Is it possible to import existing reference data into Collector Earth Online, like as a CSV? Okay.
Yes, it is.
So then potential incentives would be making already public reference data sets like from Lucas or Corin or these big land survey data sets freely available through Collector Earth Online, so it's just the place to go when you need reference data. Is it also possible to make a citable reference data set?
So right now there's a DOI that you could generate for any one of your sample collections, but another one of these things that we were asking for or putting on the list of things that would be really great to have is a library of published reference data that other people could actually use. So that's one of the things that we've been talking as a need as a community for a while. I don't know how close we are to actually getting that done. We have the DOI part done, but I don't think we have the library part built yet. And if that's something that we hear a loud voice for, we'll figure out how to resource it and get that built out. Because that would be great, because that's the first step, right? So if we're able to get multiple ones of these libraries pushed out, including Peter's million sample thing, right? And there's a detailed or some sort of savvy or witty metadata structure for it, so you could stream some of that into what you're trying to do, so you can maybe boost it for your area. And then you can link that into something like one of Tim's machine learning models. Now we're starting to get into a situation where we're getting those pipes built to build out that vision that Gina laid out. And again, it's just going to take some time and coordination between all of us to figure that part out.
Great, thanks.
Do you want to add to that?
No?
Oh,
Great.
there you go.
I mean, I think there's a lot we could brainstorm. I mean, there's obviously a need. I think you were doing some integration with Zenodo, with Collector Earth Online, so that uploads the data as well, right? The reference data set. So there's an example of making it easier to share that reference data. About keys, like talking about interpretation keys, this comes across a broader problem of sharing metadata that can be shared across projects. So if we have visual classification or ground data collection, you want to use the same definitions of things, so then that data can be combined and shared across projects. That's something that probably needs to be done. If it is, and if you know of something like that, please tell me afterwards, because I don't know about it. But yeah.
I mean, this is fantastic. My question was, does this have the potential also to be a crowdsourcing platform where you have the ability to set it up as an institution and a project and so on, but if you can actually enlist greater participation of people who are not necessarily experts and so on, it could be formidable, because there'd be people who would participate for completely different reasons. And with that, I think the ability to generate a much larger data set and potentially even serve as an archive of changing land cover would become possible. And I mean, is that part of the ambition? Is it part of the possibility?
That was what you're talking about. That was the grand vision. It's like, how do you set even the original name, our little witty name on this thing in the very beginning was MAPTCHA, as a play on CAPTCHA. You know how people just look through that thing. The idea is just like, is this water, yes or no? So if you look at the flexibility in terms of how you could build a project and how you could share a project, there's opportunities in there to make everything public with a link and just blast it out to the universe. So that thing's set up, but the ease of use, like with some of these big, huge crowdsourcing applications, to make it super simple as like a swiping sort of app, we haven't done that part yet. But if there's an interest in something like that, that's maybe something we should discuss together.
And what I meant was, I mean, the public can participate anonymously.
Yeah.
But I think, if participation could actually be recognized, so that, in a sense, gamifying that part of it as well, then there's a much bigger added incentive for people to participate. Like eBird, for instance, just the number of lists you can put, and you have a presence on as a member of the public as well. So
We've been talking about that. Like, so for the folks that are doing the highest number of collections, maybe they get a gift card. The highest number of collections, they get a blast of some sort. So if you look at the basic system itself, it has the ability to capture those metrics, and it has the ability to make things as public as you like and as distributable as you like. The interface to actually make something go viral, we just don't know how to do that. Google people, maybe.
Add a game on Steam and
yeah, but
make it fun.
Yeah, but the concept behind it, like if you look at the basic infrastructure or the vision itself, that's where we're hoping to go for certain use cases, for simple use cases. But then you also are trying to get some of these more complicated use cases where people want to use the same sort of thing for forest inventories associated with carbon credits in a variety of different places. So those have to be more rigorous sort of collections. And so the idea is to try to figure out how do you meet the needs for both, and if you can meet the needs for both and crowdsource all that information, how do you share that information between the institutions and feed those models in an ongoing fashion?
thanks.
But we get CAPTCHA involved.
Yeah.
Replace the text CAPTCHAs with image chips.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so I know there's so much that's already gone into Collect Earth Online on creating really robust templates that can be searched, so you don't have to create a whole new project. You can look at a very standardized template for your collections.
Yeah.
And that's a really phenomenal functionality. And I think maybe the next step could be, putting those hard standards in for new institutions and also maybe grading other institutions in a way to kind of classify those 23 million points, getting a better sense of the quality of that data, and maybe tapping into some semantics in in computer science world or in the machine learning world on how those points are labeled, and sort of setting those standards in those templates is a great next step. And I know that's probably already in the works too, but
we want to be very careful, right? So this whole thing is a community tool where individual institutions are collecting information about things that they care about. So CEO doesn't own the data, we don't own the data, the institution and the folks collecting the data own the data. And so the trick becomes, how do you give them a mechanism to be able to share it and get it recognized? And if folks opt into that and they say, yes, we want to be part of that, then doing that meta-analysis that you're talking about becomes feasible. And I think that first step is the big one that we need to figure out how to unlock. And then attached to that, before you start doing the meta-analysis on those sorts of things, how do you build a library for people to share it? Right? That's where I think there's some sensitivities, correct?
I think, yes, sharing the data. I'm not sure if you were talking about sharing the data or sharing the classification schemes. Were you?
More about getting agreements on some of the collection A versus collection B. Some of them align, some of them don't, based off of the schemes that were used. So kind of crosswalking those already and agreeing as a community. Even though we know collection A has their own aims and collection B has their own aims, how do you find that middle place? I think that's the whole point of the discussion, but it's a standards question.
Yeah, I think that warrants a conversation. The other one too, Tim, which is I know you're spending a lot of time on, there's a whole bunch of different algorithms that are out there, machine learning algorithms that are out there. And I know you're in charge of a TensorFlow working group, and you've done a fabulous job lining that up. I don't know how many different models that you've built out, but each one has its own separate set of collections that are involved in it. So if we were to flip the question and say, okay, being a person who has a repository of models, what would make your life easier, or how could you get closer to the vision that Gino laid out to be able to enrich those models with something like Collect Earth Online or Ground? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and automation, that's a huge element of that too. And I think, I forgot your name, what was? Peter, yeah, Peter brought that up about moving from as an individual and an institution into big data, and how do you automate that? I think you're gonna probably answer that question that you just drove at with automation there, because eventually you're gonna have to move across those platforms.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
There's probably some intersection putting together your different ideas, gamification and incentivizing publishing of data through gamification. So you get street creds for the amount and the accuracy of and repeatability of the data that you provide, and then having that all be automated. So now you're encouraged to put it into one public forum, and then you have your pipeline for your automation coming in. So there's like a lot of different pieces of the puzzle, but they're all adjacent, which is the good thing. Kind of hard but solvable problem.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Is there another question? Because I got one for you.
For me?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Is that okay? Can I ask you a question? So I know you gave a presentation today on ground.
Yeah.
I'm totally ambushing you here.
You have to shoot me, you said?
I'm ambushing you.
All right. Yeah.
So
I'm ready.
We had a conversation on ground earlier today, and it was like, if you guys haven't seen that presentation, go look at it on the video thing. It was really nice.
Demos at 6 p.m.
Demo's at 6 p.m. Go see it.
Broken demo, but demo.
Broken demo. So in terms of trying to figure out how to get integrations between these sorts of things, what are some thoughts there?
Well, there's generally a spectrum, right, which varies from like ease of use to the user to flexibility on one side to like really specific and really easy on the other side, so harder and easier. The first step would be getting an export and import which is compatible. So getting them to talk the same data formats, get my samples out, load it into ground, do your thing on the ground in the field, export the data maybe back into Collect Earth Online, into Earth Engine. That would be like phase one. That's harder because you have to hit some buttons to do it. It's not hard, but it's more general because it's not just specific to Collect Earth Online and ground. And then you want to make it easier, you can move up the spectrum and have a button that does that for you and pushes the data back and forth, right? Even further along, you have them talking to the same database, right? So they're just reading the data from the same spot. So there's no button to push anymore. It just kind of is there, right? And you can kind of keep going in between. There's like APIs. There are a lot of ways we can do it. The first one is the easiest, and that's probably where we'll begin.
That's awesome.
That answer your question?
That answered my question. And I also want to make sure we have maybe 5-10 minutes left. So for the folks that are interested in continuing this conversation, maybe we can get a few of you guys with some names and stuff. So maybe we can continue it here, or maybe continue it after Geo for Good for those that are interested. You okay with that?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. So if there's any other questions? Going once, going twice? Great. Let's get folks together. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
We'll be right back.